Um, uh, I think the main thing that I want to talk about is just the point of the course in some way, because a lot of the stuff I could show you, you might not necessarily understand, because it's all this like sort of industry what stuff that you'll understand when you study the course eventually, but right now it might be just like shiny things that you don't understand. So I want to try and kind of convince you of what we try and do in UCD and why that might be useful and maybe why you fit into that. This is a quote from the Interaction Design Association in America, and I think it like kind of encapsulates a lot of the kind of ideas that we're going for in it, because it's not necessarily this idea of being a designer. It's about this idea of creating relationships between people and the things that they use. So it's, again, it's not purely about doing something for a screen, it's doing something for a screen that does something for a person. So it's a bit more complex than that. It's certainly always about people. So it's like, it's written on the tin, it's user-centered design. It's called user-centered design, not people-centered design, because we got to use the word user because it's about digital stuff. So we've chosen the word user in that. If you want people-centered design, there's a field called HCI, human-centered design, which is another thing, which if you want to design, you know, potato peelers and stuff like that, that's human-centered design. We're about digital products and services. The idea that we go for the whole time is that if we try and look at what people are doing, how they're operating in the world, how they might be struggling with things, and how people get things done, perhaps under adverse circumstances, if we can see that and understand that, then perhaps there's a way we can design around that and make things better, or learn from the way people are solving things in the real world and make it into something that works even better for them. So we're looking to find what people really need and try and design for that. So, yes, what it says on the slide. So the main driving force behind this is the willingness and the desire to create things for people. I think this is a thing that I kind of neglected perhaps in previous presentations that I might have done, where there's a lot of focus, I suppose, institutionally on design and that kind of stuff, and that can alienate people perhaps if you're not from a design background per se. We have loads of people who come into UCD that are not from a design background, and they do exceedingly well anyway, because the urge to design for people is the paramount thing that we're going for there. Previously, before courses like this, people in user-centered design fields came from all sorts of different places. So by way of example, the original thing I first studied out of matric was jewelry. Then I did a little sojourn into industrial organization and labor studies, and then I went sideways into information technology for higher education, and then I did some music, and I've got this weird master's in music / education. So before the field kind of worked itself out and courses started being developed, people that work in the industry come from various backgrounds. And perhaps one of the things that you can see in these various things is, again, it's people concerned about people. Even somebody that's doing library science is concerned about how people perhaps find things. So how do you make things findable? How do you search for things? How do people access information? How do you think about the way people digest information? And that becomes important as a user-centered designer, for example. But anyway, generally, there's a specific design process that we would do if we're making something. Every industry has the similar design process, no matter what industry you're in. There's a kind of similar flow to how people create solutions. This is the same kind of process, we just have different things built into it. And what we did when we designed the curriculum is we follow that process as a way of teaching you how it works. So the way I kind of describe it to my students is the wheel is turning, but the car is still moving forward. So you learn the first step, for example, how to gather data, and you do a project around that. Then you learn how to create these kind of archetypal people. Then, once you know those two things, then you do both of them. Then you learn the third thing, then you do all three. And you slowly build up your skills until by about halfway through the year, you're doing the full process and you're repeating it again and again and again in different contexts to get it right and rehearse the skills so that you get some mastery over them. So in order to do that, it's broken up into 3 pieces. So we've got the theory components of it, the actual doing of it, and then how that fits into the real world. So what we do, and this is kind of in a linear order, is the first task we do is we try and prove that what is the point of the course. So we kind of go, should this course exist? These are the following reasons. If we focus on users, we're going to end up creating better things for people. It's going to create businesses that innovate. It's going to create market differentiation. It's going to make products that work. It's going to get consumer loyalty, all that kind of stuff. We figure out all those kind of things. Then we go, okay, that's fine. So let's look at the design tools we could use to try and find out what those problems are and how it works. Then we go, okay, now we know how to design, or the principles of design, so what do people do? So we find out how to do the research to understand people. Then we start looking at telling stories as a way of coming up with solutions. So you tell stories about success in order to visualize how the final thing will actually work. This involves a lot of post-it notes. I frequently get these very surprised emails from Lauren at the front desk when I'm ordering like $4,000 of post-it notes. We go through a lot of them, but the main thing here is that we use these kind of visual tools and we collaborate a lot. So no design process happens by itself. You're usually working in groups to do that, and you iterate and you go through designs again and again until you get it right. You also learn the kind of way of planning your projects in terms of research. So how you do things, how you manage your projects, how you choose the right kinds of research to get things done. You look at the research, you produce results from it, you start looking at those results and trying to present them in ways that make sense in various kind of forms. So you start learning how the design of these things kind of work. You look at sort of technical things like web analytics, that kind of stuff. You look at the way things are structured and you build ways to visualize those structures. You build these archetypal people that you can use to visualize your solutions called personas. You map consumer journeys. You do all these kind of interesting things as tools to understand what's going on. What just happened? Okay. And you tell stories as well. So this is an example of a storyboard. So this student has not created the solution to the problem. He is at the moment just telling how it should feel and how it should work for that person. Telling the story as a way to design the solution. Then we move on to application. So we learn how to structure information. We learn how to make prototypes, sort of working versions of our solutions. We learn how visual design works, because no matter how technically proficient something would be, beautiful things work better. So we try and make things that are visually appealing. We learn visual design, and then we learn how it all comes together in interfaces. So this involves working with information structures, also visual information structures. So how do we structure the way things look so it conveys meaning? And again, we do lots of collaboration. And we move from very cheap, kind of handwritten, hand-drawn, quick things all the way to the point where we've got prototypes that are beautiful and ready to roll. So apparently I press right again and it plays. So then you're able to make prototypes that can work, so you can actually show how your solution works and present that to people and use them as working examples, so coders and developers can actually take the work that you've done and move on with them as final kind of things. Then in terms of visual design, so these are just some examples of how students are trying to visualize the research they've done in a beautiful and interesting way. It's trying to kind of present things so that they make a lot of sense visually. And then we put it all together in the final stretch of UCD. So the final stretch is, it comes down to also what Melissa and Eckhart have been saying as well. A big part of this is the brand challenge. Live briefs, huge amount of collaboration between the various disciplines that Red and Yellow has. It's a very exciting thing, it's very challenging, but it results in a very deep experience, which is very useful. You do workplace learning, aka an internship, and you do professional practice, which is again a kind of another project that allows you to put all these pieces together in one sort of thing that makes sense. Again, rehearsing your skills. The funny thing about it is that, so I've got these 2 videos here, and these are a group of 5 students. One of them is traditionally trained as a designer previously. The rest of them are from psychology, financial management, and I can't remember the other 2. And they got a live brief, and they had done a couple of weeks of design, and it came together really quickly. So you learn how to design. So they did an intro video for the client in order to show how it could kind of work in a very flashy sort of way. And they also did a working prototype with huge amounts of research and all that kind of stuff. And they did this in 2 weeks. So the handy thing, and why I've chosen to show you this, is if you want to see the process of this, it's in my office. So you can come to my office and see all the workings that cover the wall. So you can, and I can, if those of you who are interested, I can talk you through how that process works and how they got to this prototype that they presented to the client. Finally, well, penultimately, there's an independent study, Eckhart alluded to it as well, where every single UCD student gets to pursue a project over the entire year of their own choosing. So you get to find something that interests you and pursue it. So every time you learn something in the main part of the course, say you learn about a certain kind of research, you apply it to your own project, and that runs through the entire year. So for example, Danielle Niehaus. At the moment this year, my students are, amongst other questions, pursuing some of these questions, you know, so students making decisions on what they want to do in higher education, a community food initiative, the students trying to help out, anxiety and depression, people in the design industry and their mental health. There's 2 students that are doing very interesting stuff about gender-based violence and the precarity of women in the nightclub sort of scene in Cape Town, which is quite interesting. And somebody else that's trying to find, like, is there a better way to navigate shops in a store? But in all these examples, again, it's this idea of being about people. So all of these things that they're looking at, where someone, I know with the healthcare one, Kaylee was driving down the road and she saw this enormous queue outside a hospital, and she thought, there's got to be a better way than this. This is rubbish. So she took that on as her project. So it wasn't like she saw a shiny object somewhere. She actually saw a group of people that she thought she could come up with a better solution for, and then she pursued that. So it is about people. One of the big questions is like how you might fit into this whole thing, and there's a kind of revelation I had a while back that I think is kind of interesting about this, and that is, so far, the fields that people have studied previously who are now or have been in UCD. So you get what you'd expect up at the top there: graphic design, multimedia design, people from film and media. They probably have a sense that this digital thing is happening and we should sort of get on board with that. And then you've got a whole bunch of people here who are, in some ways, often kind of the interesting people that join. So they're not designers, but they have the sense that perhaps after studying psychology, that there's some way they could make it more actionable, make a product that makes sense, or just do something that they feel has a little bit more meaning and has a little bit more effect from it, as opposed to the theory that they may have learned previously. These things become very, very interesting, and these people are very interesting, and I promise you, if you're concerned about the design aspect of it, you will learn it. It happens. Design is not this solitary genius kind of idea. If it was, there would be very few designers in the world. And right now, being in Cape Town, you can't leave your house without tripping over an Illustrator or something. Consider the 2 students I've had who studied financial management. One of my students last year, she got an internship at 22/7. I don't know if you know what 22/7 is, but it's a personal sort of banking and budgeting app. They were trying to poach my student and give her a job before she finished the course. Because what better to have as a designer designing your financial management app than someone who studied finance and knows how to design? There's no better argument for that. I would rather have somebody with 4 months of design under their belt and 3 years of financial management doing that than someone with 3 years of design and a weekend where they spent 100 Rand or something, you know? It's that kind of idea. Like, that's why banks project themselves as quite serious, because you're giving them money, right? I mean, Standard Bank have never had a campaign that, like, we're a clown car. So that's basically what I wanted to talk about in UCD. So I think that if you walk away with anything, it's this idea that if you are concerned and interested in designing for people within the constraints of this kind of idea of designing for them in this sort of new digital age, then you can probably find a home in UCD that will work for you.